see my first slide, the
Yes,
cover
we
slide?
can.
Okay, very good.
Thank
All
you.
right, so
Thank you.
I know Mike already, thank you for the introduction, Mike. I appreciate that. Just to add a few more details, I've been a registered dietitian at the VA for, embarrassing to admit, 36 years, actually, including my internship. And a majority of that has been working with chronic kidney disease patients, which has really become very much a passion of mine. Just the ability to develop relationships with patients and just really see their challenges, their triumphs, just really be able to kind of follow the whole pattern. So really blessed to be able to do that. In 2016, I really had the honor and privilege to become a living donor to a dear friend of mine. That's another topic for another day, but I will say that it was just career-changing and life-changing good for me, right up there with giving birth to my kids. So really been blessed by that, and it's been just a huge learning process for me. And then as a result of that, I actually do need to be careful watching my blood pressure, and I do follow with a nephrologist. So all the things that I say to patients all day long, I'm really preaching it right back to myself, and it really helps me to reinforce good habits in my life when I'm working with patients on that. So my intended audience seems to be my family and friends, but but it's also intended to be people living with kidney disease of all stages, people at risk of developing kidney disease, and people who love and support other people with chronic kidney disease. So that probably encompasses pretty much all of us. And then, so my objectives are really, again, to address all stages of kidney disease. And it gets to be challenging sometimes to focus on what's important at each stage, but I think it's going to kind of become more obvious as we keep going, just how that's very individualized. So we'll talk about what the current evidence tells us about healthy eating, and then we'll also look at some key nutrients important in CKD that we can find when we're making food choices. And I really hope to be able to answer your questions today. So when we talk about healthy diet for kidney disease, there's just so many different things we're trying to get at. And one thing that's really important to keep in mind is that the kidneys really are part of a team, and that team includes lots of other organ systems. We think of the heart, we think of the blood vessels to the kidney, we think of the lungs, we think of the liver, we think of the digestive tract, we think of the bones and the red blood cells. All of these systems and tissues and organs are related to each other. And when one system starts to suffer, then the rest of them suffer. So all these things that we're looking at for goals really all relate to each other. So for some people, it's just going to be a matter of we want to achieve and maintain a healthy weight, knowing that overweight, obesity, there's more likelihood for problems with all of the organ systems, including the kidneys. Although this people of a low weight and too low of a BMI can also struggle with this. Managing blood pressure, managing blood sugar. We want to protect the heart and blood vessels. We want to reduce inflammation, which is really the process that's kind of part of all chronic diseases. We want a healthy gut, not only for keeping the bowels moving, but also to promote good bacteria in that gut. Maybe in later stages of kidney disease, and especially if the heart is having challenges, maintaining proper fluid balance becomes a problem and a challenge. Maintaining normal blood chemistries, potassium, phosphorus, sodium, and then bone health can become affected. And through any stage of chronic disease, regardless of what a person's weight is, malnutrition can become a problem. And so the goals that we have with healthy diet are going to be addressing these things, and at different stages and in different people's situations, different goals might become more or less important as we keep going. So where should we focus? I want to start out by talking about just some key nutrients that we look for in food labels. And as we talk about those things, I think it's going to become more obvious what we're trying to achieve with healthy diet in general. So the key nutrients to focus on for CKD, and by the way, CKD stands for chronic kidney disease. And so the main ones I want to focus on are listed here. Sodium is probably the one nutrient that nearly everybody with chronic kidney disease would benefit from limiting. And it's really the main nutrient that I encourage my patients to look at food labels and look at the numbers. With any of the other ones, people might also look at carbs and calories. Um, but sodium is one that I definitely am encouraging pretty much all of my patients to look at. We're aiming for less than 2,300 milligrams per day of sodium, and the typical American diet provides quite a bit more than that. Um, and and so where is sodium found in the food? So a small amount is found in natural sources. Really, just a tiny amount is found in naturally in food. Um, and then some of the salt that we eat, or the sodium that we eat, is added to our food, maybe at the table, maybe sprinkling salt on or using salty condiments. Um, but probably the majority of sodium in a lot of people's diets comes from processing. We think of canned foods, we think of convenience foods, anything you can kind of heat and serve. We think of fast foods, we think of things with obvious salt on them, like salty snacks. And then maybe even some things you don't really think of as being high sodium, like commercial baked goods. And I'm just going to so one of the things you want to look at is on food labels, you might see some terms that are helpful, and there are legal definitions for some of these terms. So, for example, if you see salt or sodium free, it truly legally has to be less than 5 milligrams per serving. So that you can be rest assured that that is a low sodium item. If it's low sodium, it's less than 140 milligrams per serving. If something can be reduced sodium, it can still have quite a bit of sodium. It has to have less than 25% of the original amount of sodium in that product. So sometimes those terms can be a little bit confusing and maybe misleading if you're not quite sure what you're reading. Let's look at a few examples. And this is where I think food labels are very, very helpful. And I really encourage my patients to just simply take a look at the food packages they already have in their refrigerator, in their pantry, and start kind of just looking at where the sodium might be coming from. So just thinking back to, we're aiming for about 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. Let's just look at this one example of a frozen dinner. This is Hungry Man. And a lot of the patients I work with do kind of rely on frozen dinners. So one serving, it says in the nutrition facts, the serving size is one container. And if you eat the entire serving, it's going to be 1,400 milligrams of sodium. And then it also says a percentage, and that percentage is out of the 2,300 milligram daily value that we're aiming to stay within. So eating that one meal is going to be 61% of your daily value. Another thing I can look at is the ingredient list, and I can see a number of different items that tell me that there's sodium. I see the word salt in that last line there, and then I also see sodium phosphates and monosodium glutamate. So looking for those sodium words in the ingredient list also clues us in that there's maybe quite a bit of salt in that. So now let's look at a Healthy Choice. Healthy Choice is another brand, and I frequently recommend this brand to patients. This one, the entire meal is one serving, and the whole meal is 240 calories. So this is definitely not as big of a meal as that Hungry Man was at 790. But I can see that I'm getting quite a bit less sodium in this meal than I did in the Hungry Man. So this one has 400 milligrams and only 17% of the daily value. That might be plenty of food for some of the people I work with. For me, that would definitely not be enough food. So I probably would want to add a few more items to this meal to really round it out. So I'm adding a serving of fruit, adding a salad, maybe a glass of milk or some yogurt to really kind of just enhance this meal and make it a little bit more food. Another example would be canned soup. If I look at the serving size is 1/2 cup out of this concentrated soup. There's actually 2.5 servings in this one container. So if I eat one serving, I'm getting 890 milligrams of sodium. But if I eat the whole can, which I easily could do, I'm getting 2.5 servings. So I have to multiply that out. And I'm going to actually get more, or almost the entire daily sodium just from that can of soup. And for me, even if I ate the whole can of it, I would only be getting 150 calories. So that's not enough food for a whole meal. So that's not a really good deal for sodium for someone on a sodium restricted diet. And then again, I look in the ingredients and I'm seeing salt, monosodium glutamate, and sodium phosphate. Now let's look at a 25% less sodium. It's a reduced sodium. Still not a great deal because I'm still getting 630. It's 25% less, but it's still quite a bit, 27% of my daily value. So it's really not low in sodium. And next, if we look at this American cheese, again, the label really tells us one slice is the serving. 12% of my daily value contains salt and sodium citrate. And if I look at a package of Swiss cheese, I can see that I'm going to get a much better deal. It's going to fit much better at 50 milligrams and 2% of the daily value versus the American cheese at 12%. Now, if I were to have a hamburger and put 2 slices or 3 slices of American cheese on that burger, I'm going to have a lot more sodium than I was really wanting to have. Then there's some surprises that you can find on a label. And this one I just find over and over is surprising to people. So potato chips get a bad rap, and deservedly so. But if you look at the actual serving size, if you eat 1 ounce, what they say is 1 serving, getting 170 milligrams of sodium, 7% of the daily value. That's the amount in one individualized size bag of potato chips. That's actually going to fit much better than if you look at both the packaged bagel and the instant pudding, both of which have over 400 milligrams of sodium. So you might not you think of potato chips as being salty. You don't think of pudding as being salty, but you just cannot always trust your taste buds on this case. And then you can also see that if you're adhering to the serving size it says, you can make some of these foods fit pretty well. And moving on to some of the some other foods that we know are very, very low in sodium. And these are going to be your natural foods. Remember, we said there is a little bit of naturally occurring sodium in foods, but it's very, very little to even almost count. So if we look at fresh chicken, 4 ounces has 45 milligrams of sodium. Out of your 2,300, that's almost nothing. So that is really going to fit very well. And so I tell my patients all the time, if you are eating mostly low sodium, these natural whole foods, we don't even have to look at food labels. We really, it's not going to even be enough to really count. I think you're going to easily be within 1,000 milligrams of sodium for the day. And one thing I do want to mention too, that a quarter teaspoon of salt has about 500 milligrams of sodium. So there is going to be room, if you're mostly eating these low sodium foods, you're going to have room for a little bit of added salt, and you can still easily stay within that 2,300 for the day. So that's something it's surprising to people. We can fit it in. It's not like just simply staying away from added salt. We can fit that in into our otherwise naturally low sodium diet. So the next nutrient I want to talk about is potassium. This is one that's really can be tricky, I find. Not everybody with CKD has to limit potassium. Some people actually need to increase potassium. There are some medications that really make a person's blood potassium drop quickly, such as diuretics like Lasix can really deplete the body of potassium. And so sometimes we're supplementing potassium. So the goal is really to keep the person in normal range for blood levels. But as there's later stages of kidney disease, then sometimes a person's blood potassium can get too high. And then we might need to start looking at the diet. We want to keep potassium in the normal range because the heart really does not like the blood levels to be either too low or too high, and we can have problems with heart rhythm at either extreme of too low or too high. So where do we find potassium in the foods? Well, just like with sodium, there's going to be natural potassium in the food that we eat. And actually, these natural foods have a lot more potassium than they do sodium. Um, and so that's one place that we're always going to get natural potassium. Now, what you might notice about these foods, that these are foods that we typically think of as whole foods and healthy foods that we want in a heart healthy diet. But it is something we want to look at with potassium. Um, the biggest source of potassium that I like to steer people away from would be the additives that come, again, in those processed foods. So the potassium words we want to look for in the label is things like potassium chloride, potassium phosphate, potassium citrate. And we're gonna find these in sometimes beverages, and then a lot of low sodium products and a lot of convenience foods. So let's look at a few examples. Um, one seasoning that I think is appropriate for some people that are on low sodium diets is a salt substitute. This one's called no salt. There's also new salt. If I look at the label, I see that a quarter teaspoon is 0 milligrams of sodium. But it has 640 milligrams of potassium. And just for point of comparison, we know bananas are high potassium. A medium banana has 422 milligrams. So that's a lot. Actually, this quarter teaspoon of this no salt has more potassium than a banana. Now, for some people, that's not going to be a problem at all. The kidneys can handle that just fine. But I would say if you're having any problems with potassium being above the normal range, you would want to really stay away from using anything with using this product, a no salt. There's also a light salt blend that has a blend of regular salt and potassium salt that's going to be about half the amount of sodium and of regular salt and half the amount of potassium is of this stuff. So that might be an acceptable substitute as well. But I would say for anybody with CKD, good idea to mention to your doctor or your provider that you're using this, and also keep very consistent with how much you use, because if you're being supplemented for potassium, for example, we want to make sure your providers know that you're getting this source as well. Another place to look for potassium additives would be these frozen dinners. So back to our healthy choice, I think one of the reasons that they're able to get the sodium down is because they add potassium chloride, and that's part of the ingredient list here. So again, looking for those potassium additives in these lower sodium food products, or any food products that have these chemicals on here. The thing about the additives to keep in mind is that they are actually very well absorbed by the body. So the body can just absorb about 90 or 100% of these additives, whereas the potassium that's found in natural foods are less available to be absorbed. So that's why I really like to start with the additives. So looking at potassium, I really like people to, if they need to limit potassium, prioritize avoiding potassium additives in processed foods. We want to keep the fruits and vegetables in there, especially the fresh whole versions. If we're doing a good job of keeping away from the additives, we might need to exercise portion control with some of these other vegetables and fruits. But I think we can almost always fit in your favorite foods. I know bananas get a really bad rap, but I often tell people we can probably fit a little bit of banana, maybe a few slices on your cereal in the morning. What's really important is not how often you eat this food, but how much you eat at a time, because the body's trying to extract what it needs and just kind of balance that all out. And another thing we want to do, another reason to eat those fruits and vegetables, is that we want to avoid constipation, because the GI tract is one other way that the body can get rid of potassium if the kidneys aren't doing their job. So we really want those fiber sources and really keep the whole fruits and vegetables in the diet. Maybe if potassium's a problem, start looking also at juices. So stay away from drinking a lot of juice. Keep exercise good portion control with juices, especially orange juice and especially dried fruits, concentrated tomato products, and even dairy products. We really want to just focus on, if we need to restrict real foods, really focus on those and continue those fruits and vegetables as much as you can. And also be aware that boiling those vegetables will also help to reduce the potassium content. And then the final mineral I want to talk about is phosphorus. This becomes much more of a problem later in CKD, before starting dialysis, or and also during when a person's on dialysis. We want the normal blood range again. A lot of people with CKD tend to go too high on this one, and that's because the body is just not able to get rid of potassium like it should. And this buildup of potassium in the blood can start causing problems with bones. It's kind of a complex process to describe, but we do become very concerned about bone health, and then we also look at blood vessel health, and that's probably the even more damaging than the bone health, is that we can start seeing mineral deposits in the blood vessels, kind of like cholesterol, that hardens the arteries. So again, keeping that normal blood phosphorus level is going to be really important. A lot of patients on dialysis take what we call binders, big pills with their meals to help bind that phosphorus in food and help it to pass through. But I always encourage people to eat a low phosphorus diet. So what is a low phosphorus diet? Well, where is it found? So it's found naturally in, again, very nutritious foods, meats, fish, poultry, eggs, dairy products of all kinds, dried beans and peas, nuts, seeds, whole grains, really all your protein foods, very, very rich in phosphorus. Phosphorus is a mineral that the body definitely needs, but we want to avoid getting too much. So just like the potassium, we are going to start focusing first on the additives found in processed foods. We're talking the word, any chemical that has the word phosphate or PHOS in it. So again, we're looking for the phosphorus in soft drinks. Again, the process, it's sounding repetitive, I know. It's the convenience foods, it's the processed meats and cheeses, it's the bottled beverages, it's the commercial baked goods, fast foods. And here's another again, looking at the ingredient list is going to be helpful. Now, I want to mention the nutrition facts label that tells you sodium and calories is not usually going to tell you phosphorus or potassium, but that's why we want to look for the phosphorus ingredients in the ingredient list. So again, back at our Hungry Man frozen dinner, I see the words sodium phosphates. So I'm seeing not only sodium, but phosphorus in there. If I look at the American cheese, I'm seeing that that it has sodium phosphate in it. And also, actually, that cheese is, they start with cheddar cheese, which also has natural phosphorus, but then they're adding more phosphorus and more sodium in the processing of that cheese. And then same thing with the hot dog package up there. I see a sodium phosphate in there. And I also see a potassium chloride in there, and a sodium diacetate in there, and a sodium benzate, and a sodium ascorbate, and a sodium nitrate. So you're probably getting the idea that these sodium, phosphorus, and potassium additives really are abundant in our foods. And one more example is looking at the beverages. And this Hawaiian Punch actually was pretty shocking even to me when I looked at it, because I'm seeing in this one 2 different phosphorus ingredients, and I'm also seeing a sodium ingredient, and I'm seeing a potassium ingredient. So it's chock full of additives plus red dye. And then we've got cola that has phosphoric acid, and then we've got a bottled tea that has phosphoric acid. So we really want to focus, if you're having any issues with your blood phosphorus being high, really focusing on these additives that the body absorbs really well. And then the final nutrient I want to talk about is protein. And protein is, again, a really essential macronutrient. We call it a macronutrient because we measure it in grams, not milligrams. So all the calories we eat come from protein, come from carbs, and come from fat. All of these nutrients are essential and important for the body to function well, but we need a balance of these things. So with chronic kidney disease, the body gets less good at removing the waste products that are associated with eating protein. So as time goes on, the blood can get more acidic. Person's urea level can go up, and these things can make you feel sick and tired, and eventually, if it builds up too much, that might be causing nausea and vomiting and no energy, and maybe that's a sign that we need to start dialysis. So one of the things we talk about in earlier stages is really trying to avoid being too excessive in protein. And the guidelines that are out there say avoid excessive, and a dietitian can help calculate what that would mean by what we mean by excessive. Basically, we see usually about 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, and avoid going over 1.3. But we also have to be aware too, if a person is overweight or obese, we can really overestimate that if we use the actual body weight. So it gets a little tricky to estimate. So that's where sometimes the services of a dietitian can be really helpful to just help a person just individualize those recommendations. So putting it all together, we really, again, just want to focus on meals, food, and I don't know about you, but I tend to eat food. I'm not looking at nutrients all the time. We think in terms of food. So I think some of the best advice we can give is to keep a balance. We want to balance the calories. Maybe some people we need to take in more calories, especially if a person's elderly and struggling with malnutrition or struggling with appetite. We need to try to increase calories. For a lot of us, we need to try not to consume more calories than we're able to burn. We want to try to keep weight managed to head off chronic kidney disease. We want protein, but we want enough, but not too much. But again, we're balancing the calories, the protein, the carbs, the fat. One thing we might want to be careful with carbohydrates, especially if blood sugars can be high. So really limiting the sugar can be very helpful with that. But we do want to keep in the fiber-rich carbohydrates. So again, those whole fruits and vegetables with the skins on and the seeds in place and the whole grains. We want those fiber-rich carbs to stay in the diet, again, to keep those bowels moving, to build up the good bacteria in the gut, and keep the kidneys happy. We want healthy fats. We want fluids. We definitely want to hydrate enough, but we in later stages of kidney disease or with heart failure, we want to be careful not to get too much fluid either. We want to avoid extremes. So I would caution, I wouldn't say, I would be cautious with going on a very low carbohydrate diet. Although I will say that that could be helpful for blood sugar control and for weight management. Maybe that would be beneficial for some people to reduce carbs, maybe even to a lower carbohydrate diet. But that's probably going to result in more protein intake, which could stress the kidneys and aggravate that blood acidity that we were talking about. It also could drive up the potassium and the phosphorus. So again, I think it's really helpful to meet with your team if you are wanting to attempt kind of a little bit more of an extreme diet. It's just good to get maybe a second or third opinion about that, and maybe some help with meal planning. And then I would also avoid kind of some of those fad cleanses. Maybe a juice fast could really mess you up with potassium being too much, and also could be very inadequate if continued for the long term. And then overly restricted diets. One of the things I really try to do as a dietitian is try to help people relax with, they get overwhelmed by so many restrictions. We've got sodium, we've got protein, we've got carb and fat, and potassium and phosphorus and fluid, and it's very overwhelming. So one of what I think is one of my most important roles is to just help streamline and simplify and try to work on what we should focus on to eat, not to eat. So trying to help people relax with that. And I think you've probably got the point in this presentation that we really want to avoid the additives in the foods. We want real food in its natural state. We want to make the food flavorful, but trying not to add a whole lot of salt. We want to really focus on home cooked foods. In fact, at the VA here, we have whole cooking classes. We used to have we have had in the past a 6-week cooking class just for kidney disease patients, where we're focusing on these different topics and then incorporating recipes each time. And we talk about making this food flavorful. And there's lots of ways you can do that with herbs and seasonings and other vegetables, and to make things taste good. And there is room for a little bit of real salt in your otherwise natural low sodium food that you're making. I really encourage people to try to put vegetables wherever they can in their diet. Makes it colorful, adds fiber. They're naturally low in calories, naturally low in sodium, low in phosphorus, low in all the things we're trying to be low in, and just packed with good nutrition that's just helpful. So really packing those in wherever you can. And then I'm going to really promote the National Kidney Foundation website. Has so much information, and if I think in helping to put it all together, really encourage clicking on the kidney friendly diets tab on that website, and there you will see Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, plant-based diet, just for some ideas. They're all going to be sort of overlapping each other and pretty similar, but they're going to be, again, pushing you towards those whole foods and getting that right balance without getting too much sodium. And about the plant-based diet, there is quite a bit of research to say that plant-based proteins are gentler on the kidneys. They are not going to produce so much of that body acid as the animal proteins do. So it's not a bad idea to think in terms of getting more plant proteins in the diet and maybe cutting back on some of the red meats, but still getting some protein. So I think putting that together is really helpful, getting just ideas or moving towards that. One of the examples of that I mentioned with the healthy eating patterns is the DASH diet, again accessible through that National Kidney Foundation kidney.org website. And this is going to give you, just to show you what it looks like, it gives you examples of what we want in there and how many servings. It helps you, comes up with some meal plans, just menu ideas. So really definitely want to promote the National Kidney Foundation, kidney.org. Click on the patient, and then you can jump to the content and see recipes, kidney-friendly diets, general nutrition, exercise, just really good things. And I think if nothing else, if it's too overwhelming to think about grams of this and milligrams of that and servings of this, just think about recipes that taste good to you. Maybe try cooking once a week. I spend probably the majority of my time talking to patients about simple things they can cook at home that can incorporate these fresh whole foods. Another great website is promote my own national nutrition.va.gov. So the VA has really great resources for recipes and actually entire cookbooks that all are going to have recipes that are maybe not specifically kidney friendly in terms of potassium restricted, but definitely friendly to those chronic diseases that we talked about. And they do list, the recipes all list how much you're getting of each of those nutrients in there too. So that is what I wanted to cover today, and I would really love to hear what